Well, hi there, everybody. This is Dr. Schroeder with this week's video introduction to week number 8, our final week of class in our course in the principles of healthcare research. And once again, a very nice discussion of week number 7. Week number 7, we finished up our discussion of qualitative research, focusing once again on this article by Lee, Lin, and Hicks. This is the study of the Taiwanese patients that are receiving hemodialysis, and with the goal of the study to try to examine some of the attitudes, values, beliefs, the lived experience that these subjects are experiencing. And specifically, we're supposed to focus on the credibility. Were the results credible? Was all the potential information that could have been squeezed out of the study received? Were the things that the researchers could have done a little bit differently? And the discussion this week was really pretty accurate. Most of you did pick up on some potential weaknesses in the study. And one thing I want to kind of reiterate is I've mentioned early in the class, but just because a study has some weaknesses doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad study per se. It just means that sometimes the reliability or the transferability or the generalizability may not be as strong as it would be otherwise. This is particularly true with qualitative studies. Quantitative is a little bit different. Quantitative, we really want to make sure that we get accurate data that's very specific, and we want as much data as possible, as many data points. In qualitative, we're really more focused on what is the quality of the information that we're getting out of the subjects themselves. And there were some limitations in this study. One thing I'd point out is it was mentioned in class. This particular study used, or a study that it used, was known as a Colliazzi method. The Colliazzi method is a not terribly widely used research method, but it is really like most other qualitative studies with one important difference, and that is in the 7 steps of Colliazzi, really the final steps involve going back to the study subjects once the study is completed or once the data is analyzed, and then going back, presenting that information to the subjects and saying, does this look accurate? Is there anything else that we need to do here? And then that again sort of opens up the door that, was there more information that could be received? Now, in a true Colliazzi study, really all the subjects should have that question asked, or at least the majority of them should. In this particular study, it was kind of pointed out that it was kind of like mentioned in 2 different places. One, it said that the subjects were queried and the subjects were given a lot of feedback. But then a couple paragraphs later, it said that only one subject was. And so that's not really a true Colliazzi method. It doesn't necessarily mean it was a bad study. But it does bring into questions as to why did you choose that methodology if you weren't prepared to go and try to get the information from all of the subjects. So there could be any number of reasons for that. Again, this is a very small study. One of the researchers you'll notice is in the United States, and the other 2 are actually in Taiwan. The researcher in the United States actually, his goal was, and I'm sure that his role in this was to probably do most of the coding of the data and to formulate the actual data analysis itself, with Lin and Lee doing most of the data collection. It's very common in research, by the way, is that when you have a team of researchers like this, you have one researcher in particular is focused mostly on methodology or on statistics or something like that, where the others, usually the first and or second person in the study, are there really coming up with most of the ideas and most of the data analysis. But it did seem that this study did have some weaknesses in the sense that there could have been a little bit more robust focus on what was the, what were the subjects here trying to say? What was the, the real message for the subjects? And as mentioned last week, the patients that were in the study tended to be a little bit younger than would be the norm for ESRD patients. Again, doesn't mean it's a bad study. It doesn't mean that it's the results aren't valid or that a good job wasn't done. But the reason for that could have been explained a bit better within the context of the study. Many of you pointed that out, and that is actually a pretty accurate statement. But still, this study does give a pretty good idea of what a study should look like, or how a study reads in a qualitative journal. And as you've seen, there's really kind of a big difference between qualitative and quantitative, just the way these things read, the way that they are laid out, and it's because the goals of the study are completely different. Qualitative studies tend to be, in my opinion, easier to read because they're written more like a storyboard or like a storyline, where quantitative studies are generally very methodical and very analytical and very much by the book, where you have your introduction, research question, hypotheses, method, discussion of statistics, and then what does those statistics mean? Qualitative is much more free-flowing as a general rule. It's pretty much the nature of the beast. So anyway, also this week, your qualitative studies should all be submitted. I'm recording this on Sunday morning. Happy Father's Day, by the way. For those of you who are fathers, congratulations. Have a great day. For those of you that have fathers, well, remember them. They appreciate it, believe me. So the last week of discussion is going to focus on something that has been mentioned throughout the program, and you've read all about it. But we're really going to focus today on this institutional review process, the IRB, and the importance of making sure that study subjects' rights are protected, and that ethical research methods are being used all the time. So you're going to review some reports here. You're going to talk about the Belmont report and read about some of the seminal issues that we've had with nursing research in the past. Probably the most egregious that most of you probably heard about is the Tuskegee experiment. And this is the experiment that was done, or it was a longitudinal quantitative study that started back in the 1930s and didn't end until the 1970s. What made this an ethical nightmare was because this is a study of African American males in a very poor rural area of Georgia. And the nurse researcher that worked throughout the entire run of this study didn't point out, and it was never really questioned, the ethics. And because that was an issue when the study started, it was a study of syphilis in the African American Negro male, and what were the longitudinal effects, and what were the effects of this, which is, in today's language, it would be fairly questionable, because really what it was trying to do was compare other studies that would have been done on white males, and was the genetics any difference between the blacks and whites. Today that would be kind of a questionable premise. Back in the 1930s it was acceptable. But what made it bad is that when the study started, there was no cure for syphilis. In the late 1930s, early 1940s, penicillin was developed as a cure for syphilis. These people in this study were never offered that, though. It was decided to keep them in the study and kind of keep them in the dark about the real treatment options, because it would have messed up the study if all of a sudden we started curing them. Very egregious, very difficult for us as nurses to grasp this, because one of the lead researchers was a nurse named Eunice Rivers. And Miss Rivers was trusted by these people, and when the study came out, it was found by a newspaper article or a newspaper reporter. And the results of the Tuskegee study in the 1970s really changed a lot of things in nursing research, so in all forms of scientific research involving human subjects. So a lot of the rules that we have with the IRB are they're very, very strict and must be followed. Usually you don't have a big write-up about it in the nursing journals or in research articles per se, just because, it's for the same reason I think I've mentioned in class. When you pass medications, you don't document in the nursing chart or in the patient's chart that you've done all of your patient checks and that you use 2 patient identifiers. It's just sort of taken by virtue of the fact that since you are following hospital protocol, you've done that. You don't necessarily have to documented in the chart. Likewise, as long as a researcher says that IRB approval was received, IRB approval was conducted, that denotes that all of the things that are there to protect the patient are actually being upheld. And it's the role of the IRB and any institution to see that that is done. A couple things for housekeeping. I'm just looking here to make sure. Note that the due dates for discussions are different this week because it is our final week of class. Final grades are due on Friday, by Friday night. So initial responses are due by Tuesday evening, and then your follow-up responses by Thursday evening. You'll also see that the final exam for the class, this is your statistics exam, is going to be open today. It is Sunday, so I'm going to be opening up a little bit early, and it will be open through, I believe it is Thursday evening. So you've got until Thursday evening to complete the final exam. I'll be posting a reminder about that later as we get close to the end of the week. And so that will wrap up our class, and it has been my pleasure, my blessing, and my distinct honor to be with you throughout these 8 weeks. Please also note that there's a end of course survey. I'd appreciate your feedback on that. The feedback that you leave for us is important. They really are reviewed. It becomes a basis for my personal evaluation, and it's how I get ideas. Your feedback helps to guide not only these classes, but for example, these videos that I do came in large part by feedback from students feeling that they were felt kind of too disengaged. And so the more feedback, the better. All your feedback really kind of helps us to improve the quality of our program. So a little bit of a longer video than usual, but I hope everybody has a great day, a great Father's Day, a great week. If you have any questions, I look forward to answering them. I will be reviewing your critiques throughout the week. You'll be having them by Friday, and we'll see you in the discussion forums.